Welcome back to the second half of our session on classical Japanese literature. And so for the next half hour, we will be exploring the works of the Kamakura and Muromachi periods, which you see on your slide before you. Once again, please jot down any questions and comments that you might have and bring them to our in-person Zoom session later this month. So to begin, the Kamakura period starts with a war between two warrior families, the Taira or Heike and the Minamoto or Genji. And the war effectively ends the aristocratic Heian period and gives rise to new cultural and political brokers, the warrior class. So the court pretty much loses its lands and right to rule to these warriors from the east. Their codes of loyalty, honor, bravery, and frugality later develop into the cult of the warrior known as Bushido. And here's what the warrior at this period looked like. And as a result of the changing of the guards, the country is really plunged into war and later ruled by a military government and a family regency situated in Kamakura, which is just outside of Tokyo. The period, nonetheless, is very aristocratic in outlook, looking back with nostalgia at the golden age of the Heian period, but perhaps because of the strife and conflict, religion, mainly Pure Land and Zen Buddhism, play a great role in daily life, literature, and the arts, as these are used to explain or help to explain the human condition. A sense of Mappo, the end of Buddhist law, however, becomes a widespread phenomenon. The upheaval causes works to look for inspiration to the older forms, the 31-syllable poetry we saw, and also diary literature from the Heian period, but also transforms the monogatari tales into new war tales with the new protagonist being the warrior. So what changes in terms of theme, tone, and content? We will look at a poem by Fujiwara Shunzei, and this is the second poem that we have here. This was compiled in the 7th anthology by Shunzei's son, Teika. And I'll just go ahead and read the poem in English. As the evening falls from along the moors, the autumn wind blows chill into the heart, and the quails raise their plaintive cry in the deep grass of secluded Fukakusa. So we might think about a few of the questions here. So what scene does the second poem, in other words, Shunzei's poem, evoke? And how would you read it against the backdrop of the war between the Heike and the Genji? So what is the mood? Is it happy, warm and fuzzy? What colors does it evoke? How does it compare to the first poem from the Heian period? Does it provide any indication that the world is no longer aristocratic and has shifted to the warrior culture? So if we go back and take a look at that poem, what is the sense? And there you get a great sense of sadness, loneliness, but also of mystery, because we're wondering, what is the poet doing in the deep grasses? And the poem doesn't tell you. And what is the mood? I would say it's what, somber, melancholy, and how do we know that's the case? The plaintive cries of the quails, the chill of the autumn wind gives you that sense. And how does it compare to the first poem or the poem from the Heian period? Well, the Heian poet seems to delight in the confusion of one season to another, but Shunzei's poem is colder and bleaker. So does it indicate at all a shift from the world that's no longer aristocratic and one that is torn by war? And I guess the question is for us to think about it, but we do see that there's a shift from the very aristocratic Heian look of what I guess lyrical beauty and pattern to a much more monochromatic medieval mindset. But it also has a sense of mystery, great loneliness, and sadness that is very much a part of a war-torn period. So all of these concepts actually prevail in the 8th imperially commissioned poetry collection called the Shin Kokin Wakashu, New Collection of Ancient and Modern Poems. And this is 1205. And all of these poems are, they tend to codify the poetic conventions and aesthetics of the Heian period. And actually, it also has a very unusual number of poems. It's 1,981. And the poetic diction and also the mono no aware as an aesthetic ideal with the addition of the sabi is sadness, it is incorporated. And so once again, the poetic functions or poetic aesthetics prevail in the prose works as well, as we look at the tale of Heike. This is the most famous of this period, and it is actually disseminated by itinerant monks. So perhaps you can take some time to read the first paragraph here. So what is the first paragraph about? What is the tone? What is the outlook on life? And is this usual as an introduction to a tale about war, warriors, and battles? Did the Heike win? Actually, there's a hint in the second paragraph, and I hope you had a chance to read it before, but you can look back at it. And whom or what is the work indicting? So once again, what is it about? It signals the demise of all things, that the proud will fall. And the tone is very somber and foreboding. So the outlook of life is very bleak, but also is heralding what I guess we would call the official notice of the end of the glory days of the Heian court. And is this usual? It's an introduction to a tale about warriors. And you can think about that more, perhaps, when we meet. And did the Heike win the war? They really did not. So what does it say about a work that is about the vanquished and not the victors? And what does that say about a culture that would glorify that, or at least what do we think about a culture that will talk about those issues rather than the victors? And whom or what is the work indicting? Is it only the Heike, or is it the Genji? Is it the proud, the court, or all of humanity? This is something you can think about for certain. So again, if we look at another prominent work from the period, Hojoki, an account of my hut. This was a optional reading, so I'm not sure you had a chance to get to read it, but from the opening passage, it says, "The current of the flowing river does not cease, and yet the water is not the same water as before. The foam that floats on stagnant pools, now vanishing, now forming, never stays the same for long. So too it is with the people and the dwellings of the world." So again, this is a reflection of the end of Buddhist law and the end of the glory days of the Heian period. So we have a very strong sense of the notion of the Buddhist notion of the impermanence of life and the need to renounce all worldly attachments. Although if you read the work, the author Chome admits that he has become quite attached to his little hut. Okay. So I close this Kamakura period with some suggestions on how to teach the text. You could compare the Heian and Kamakura worlds, or ask your students to, I should say. And that would be what you could do it in terms of the courtiers versus warriors, clerics versus lady in waiting, the women from both periods, and even their abodes. And I think the students might be very good at creating memes of all of this. I'm not sure exactly how that operates, but I'll leave it to you and your students. Also, you could have them write a job ad for a samurai warrior, or they can do a manga or a rap on the Heike, because actually the Heike was, as I said, sung by itinerant monks. So those are some suggestions that I have. Then we will now move on to the Muromachi period. And as you can see from the slide here, it's made up of 3 segments. And it's really a time of 2 courts, the reign of Ashikaga military government for close to 2 centuries. And then it all ends, well, I should say it moves into a century-long civil war, which finally comes to an end with the advent of 2 daimyo landed warriors. So what is most interesting is that this is one of the most strife-riven eras in Japanese history, but it also produced a rich array of art and literary products. Some of it looked back to Heian aesthetics in painting, short stories, and linked verse, but it also expanded upon the Kamakura monochromatic mindset, and this develops into Zen austere. And it also created new forms, castles, massive paintings, and the first dramatic forms in Japanese literature. So to go on and look at part 1, the nostalgia or the reworking of the Heian, we do have nostalgia for the Heian court, and we see this most prominently in the Tosa style paintings, which harken back to the Genji scrolls that we saw in our other lecture. And you'll see an example soon. The Monogatari tales then become chronicles of battle or are replaced by Muromachi inspired tales. And then the 31 syllable waka poems are transformed into an ensemble production with several poets. The rhetoric of absence and lack is present, but there's also strengthening of warrior interest and culture, and that's very much in vogue. So to take a look at the Tosa painting, we see that the painting is from Yugao, and this is the passage that you read. And here we have Genji's servant receiving the flowers from Yugao's lady-in-waiting. And the Tosa style itself is, it originated in the 15th century and operates to the 19th century. And it preserves the vibrant color of the Genji scrolls. It features a very luminous gold paint, a thick application of colored pigments, and extremely fine brush lines. And the Muromachi tale example I have for you is from Issunboshi. And if we can take a moment to reflect on this tale, how does the 1-inch story, little 1-inch story harken back to the Heian period? And in what ways? What did the parents think of little 1-inch? What does he do to his master's daughter? How does he save the day? Is he a hero? Does the end justify the means? What gender dynamics are in play? Is it marketed, I should say it is presently marketed as a children's story in modern times, but is it suitable for children? And how would you teach the work? So going back to the first question, it does speak or talks a little bit about aristocratic life, but what do the parents think of 1-inch? They think he's a monster. And in a sense, he fulfills that by what he does to the master's daughter. He pretends that she has eaten his rice ration, so she becomes disowned. But he does save the day in the sense that he chases away the Oni demons and becomes full grown. But is he really a hero? Does the end justify the means? So these are some interesting things that we can talk about. These get cleaned up in the children's story, but they're very much in play in the original version. And the gender dynamics of the story is very, very interesting. because we can look very clearly, and this is a picture of what it looks like now marketed as a children's story that has been cleaned up. And what happens here is, you can have your students compare them with American or European children's stories and see what values are being promoted, what are the gender dynamics, in other words, who is the main character, and how are the women and children portrayed. And comparing the endings is also interesting. The Western ones end more happily than Japanese ones, why not? And lastly, I guess a little 1-inch reminds us of Tom Thumb, so we can consider looking at how the portrayal of these two little guys actually transpire. And on the reading list, I think I have also included some activities that can be useful for elementary school aged children as well. Okay, so another reworking of the Heian period comes from the creation of Renga. And Renga does two things. It ends up splitting the waka poetry into 17 syllables, and actually the main poem then later on develops into the better known haiku. But also poetry production moves from a singular activity to an ensemble one. This is the selection I have given you is from the 3 poets at Minase, and this is optional, so I'm not sure you had a chance to read it, but so interesting literary production in the sense that you have 3 to 5 poems and poets, excuse me, in this case you have 3, and they compose as many as 100 links, and it's a formal whole, but not a semantic whole. In other words, the links are only with the previous, with the poem, the link before and the link after, but not beyond that. And it does have a whole series of rules and regulations, and the practitioners include some of the commoners. And so for your students, you could have them try their hand at it. They can set up rules such as the 3rd link has to be about the school, the 4th about your class, and so on. Or they can simply just compose these poems and link them together. Okay, so from nostalgia for the Heian period, we move to a deepening of the Kamakura sabi loneliness. And this expands into wabi, a beauty of the austere and the irregular. And this is fostered by Zen Buddhism, but also the monasteries that served as centers for Chinese culture. These also presented themselves as aesthetic alternatives to the Heian cultural ideals. And the question is, why do they need to have alternatives? And in specific, the shogun head promoted Chinese poetry, but also dry stone gardens. This is Ryoanji from Kyoto. And also monochromatic sumie paintings, black and white paintings. This is by Hasegawa Tohaku. And of course, one of the most famous from this period is the Chanoyu, or tea ceremony, which took shape in 1568 and was highly patronized by warring state generals. And it was said to epitomize the beauty of things that are imperfect, impermanent, and incomplete. And so here we see an example in terms of the simple rustic elegance of the tea house. This is the exterior, and this is a picture of the interior. Okay, so perhaps it would be good for us to also take a moment to reflect on what aspects of little 1-inch or Renga poetry or the Tosa paintings actually reminded you of Heian culture, and why is this nostalgia for the Heian court so powerful? So what role do war and strife really play in that desire, and what role does war play in the deepening of the sabi that we found in the tale of Heike or Hojoki? And then the austere and irregular wabi that's found in the paintings, the ink paintings, the gardens, and the tea house, how do they differ from the Heian Mono no Aware pathos of life aesthetic? Are they same? Are they extensions? Are they complete reversals? That's something to think about. And one of the most exciting things about this period is the new vistas that it opens. One of the greatest things about this is the, or at least very impressive, is the ostentatious nature of the buildings and the paintings that are formulated here. And so with the warriors, we have the creation of huge castles, and these castles had to have huge paintings, and so they had massive byobu, folding screen paintings created, and also they were patrons of the two dramatic forums. And this is the first time that Japan has a theater, and they're known as the Do Theater and the Kyogen comic drama. So we can look at the castles, and this is Himeji Castle that showcased the power and wealth of the daimyo, landed lords, and also the massive paintings that decorated this. So here in Kano Eitoku's folding screen, we have a larger than life tree depicted and lots of gold foil, again, highlighting the power and the prestige of the daimyo. So as I said, the head of the military government, the shogun, also patronized two dramatic forms. This is the No Theater, and this is the first appearance of theater in Japanese literature, and this happened in the 14th, 15th century. It involved then, and it still does today, dance, song, and dialogue. It is highly stylized and performed by an all-male cast, and they're always in masks and in very sumptuous costumes. So here we can take a look at, this is actually Lady Rokujo, and she is angered by Genji's wife, who in this theater is represented only by a robe, which is quite stunning. Take note of the sumptuous costume, but also the fact that he is wearing a female mask. We also have, as another example, this is Atsumori, who is the central figure of the Tale of Heike episode that I also had to read. And here you notice he has an eboshi hat, he has a sword in very sumptuous costume. And for the reading for the no play, I have also selected Atsumori, and I'll give you a little bit of time to read the first 9 lines of the piece up till here. Okay, so you can consider again, who is Atsumori? Excuse me, and who is Kumagai, and what did he do to Atsumori? And why is Kumagai going to Ichinotani? Why does he feel compelled to do so? And the Tale of Heikoi told the story of the vanquished rather than the victors, and whose story is being related here and from what perspective. I also provide a link to the North Theater in Japan, Japanology by the NHK World YouTube, so I hope you take a look at it. So anyway, going back to the first question, who is Kumagai? He is the Genji warrior who killed Atsumori, the young Heike general, and Kumagai is compelled to go back to Ichinotani, where he killed Atsumori, and he's doing so to pray for the salvation of Atsumori's soul. So the Tale of Heike talked about the vanquished rather than the victor, but here we do have a victor of sorts, but is he really truly a victor? And now Kumagai is a priest, and the No play is centered on the fact that killing is considered a sin and atonement is to be exacted. So it is a very different take on the original Heike Heike episode, or is it? I think it's something for us to think about. Okay, in terms of the second theater form, it's called Kyogen. It's a comic theater, and this developed alongside No, and it actually featured rather biting commentary on especially the samurai class. Again, we have an all-male cast, but with less sumptuous costumes, no masks, and actually the language that is spoken is closer to modern Japanese. This was a optional reading, so I'm not sure that you had a chance to take a look at it, but this is what the actors themselves look like, and you can see, and oftentimes there were only 3 actors as in No. And the reading, as I said, is called Busu, and it's the story really looks more like a Laurel and Hardy comedy routine where 2 servants do something that they're not supposed to do, but they outwit their masters in the process. It's actually pretty funny, so I think your students would enjoy it. Okay, and I close with a summary of the period. Again, Kamakura is very aristocratic. There are more diverse producers and consumers, but there's a very somber sense of the end of the Buddhist war, Buddhist law. And the Muromachi Momoyama period is even more chaotic and more strife, but yet it is economically and artistically innovative. And the question is why? Why does war and social chaos cause such a production of art and the fostering of great economic prowess? So that is something that we think about as well. And finally, I end with some classroom activities, and I will leave you to peruse them at your own leisure. And these might be some suggestions that you could use in teaching the work. And well, yes, and I should say I will add a couple of resources for you to take a look at. And the Kurosawa films are also excellent, except Seven Samurai is very long. It's a great piece, but very long. And his Throne of Blood is also known to be historically accurate, and again is a Kurosawa classic. So thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to meeting with you in person on our Zoom session that's being scheduled later this month. Thank you very much.